When the world stopped for war, but football never did. The summer of 1939 began like any other. Across Europe, football pitches echoed with the cheers of fans, the whistle of referees, and the rhythmic thud of boots on grass. Men in muddy kits dreamed of trophies, not trenches. Stadiums filled with flags of clubs, not countries. But as September arrived, the world changed overnight. Germany invaded Poland, and in a flash, the roar of the crowd was drowned out by the roar of warplanes. The beautiful game, it seemed, had met its end. Yet football, like hope, proved impossible to silence. In Britain, the Football League was suspended within days of the declaration of war. Players traded jerseys for uniforms, goalposts for gunfire. Legends like Stanley Matthews joined the Royal Air Force, while others became medics or sailors. But even as bombs fell over London, people still found a way to play. Makeshift leagues sprang up in parks and barracks. Soldiers kicked around anything that resembled a ball, a tin can, a bundle of rags, or sometimes a real leather ball smuggled to the front lines. Football became more than a game. It was survival. During the Blitz, Londoners gathered in half-bombed stadiums, defying fear with every cheer. If we stop playing, then Hitler wins twice, once in battle and once in spirit. Matches raised funds for soldiers' families and kept morale alive. Wartime footballers weren't just athletes, they were symbols of endurance. In Germany, the Nazi regime saw football as propaganda. Matches were staged to showcase Aryan dominance, and teams were forced to play under strict control. But behind closed doors, ordinary soldiers played their own quiet games, brief escapes from the madness. Even in prisoner-of-war camps, football flourished. In one camp, in Poland, British and Allied prisoners formed a full league, complete with referees, schedules, and trophies carved from scrap metal. The guards, sometimes moved by nostalgia or pity, even joined in. For 90 minutes, enemies became teammates, and war paused, just a little. In the Eastern Front, amid the frozen hell of 1942, Soviet soldiers played football in the ruins of Stalingrad. It seemed insane, men half-starved and surrounded by death, kicking a battered ball through snow and rubble. But to them, it was defiance. The game reminded us we were still human, one survivor said years later. And then there was the Christmas truce of 1914, a story from the previous war that still haunted hearts during the Second. On that cold December day, British and German soldiers laid down their rifles and shared cigarettes, laughter, and a makeshift football match between the trenches. In 1939, many young soldiers had grown up hearing those stories, and though no grand truce happened this time, the memory lived on, a whisper of what humanity could be even in its darkest hour. In occupied Europe, football became rebellion. In Poland, Nazi authorities banned the sport, fearing it could unite resistance movements. But secret matches still took place in forests and courtyards, guarded by scouts who watched for German patrols. One famous underground team in Warsaw risked execution every time they played, and they kept playing. The people came to watch, hidden behind ruined buildings, cheering softly so the enemy wouldn't hear. In France, under occupation, local clubs defied German orders by playing forbidden national anthems before matches. In Norway, the national team refused to compete in Nazi-controlled tournaments, declaring, "Better to lose our boots than our souls." In Italy, football carried dangerous messages. Resistance groups used team names and match schedules as coded signals to plan sabotage operations. The sport had become a silent form of protest. Meanwhile, in neutral Switzerland and Sweden, football thrived as a refuge. Players who fled war-torn countries found safety there,
keeping the spirit of the game alive for a future peace. Even in South America, far from the bombs, the war changed football's shape. Refugees and soldiers returning from Europe spread tactics, styles, and stories that would later revolutionize the global game. As the war dragged on, football followed soldiers to every front. In North Africa, British troops played on the sand between tank tracks. In the Pacific, American and Australian soldiers built goals from bamboo and used coconuts as galls. It didn't matter where they were, football always found a way. When peace finally came in 1945, the world was broken, cities in ruins, families torn apart. But football was still there, waiting to heal. Within months, stadiums reopened. Crowds returned, waving flags not of hatred, but of hope. Soldiers came home, traded their boots of war for boots of sport. The first post-war matches were more than competitions. They were celebrations of survival. One of the most famous was in 1945 at Wembley Stadium, where a team of British servicemen faced a squad of ex-POWs. The stands were packed with families who had lost everything, but for 90 minutes they cheered like the war had never happened. The final whistle brought tears, not for who won, but for what humanity had reclaimed. Football had endured hunger, fear, and death. It had been played in prisons, in trenches, in bombed-out streets. It had united enemies and comforted the broken. In the end, when the world stopped for war, football never did, because it was more than a game. It was memory. It was resistance. It was the only thing that refused to surrender. And as peace returned, the ball rolled again, carrying with it every story of courage, defiance, and hope from the darkest years the world had ever known.